The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So today we're going to start with running through some quick stories in the first segment, and then I'll get to some of the longer stories I want to spend more time on later. The quick stories are going to be about all of the different accusers that are coming out of the woodwork and saying, Donald Trump did something to me that is or certainly borders on sexual assault. First and foremost, Donald Trump denied a People magazine journalist claim that he sexually assaulted her during an interview by saying she is not attractive enough for him to sexually assault her. Last week, I told you that People magazine journalist Natasha Stoynoff alleged that Trump tried to forcibly kiss her while she was on assignment. She wrote that Trump brought her into a room, shut the door, and within seconds, he was pushing me against the wall and forcing his tongue down my throat. Here is Donald Trump explaining at a recent rally why it's just not a believable claim.
Why didn't they make it part of the story? I was one of the biggest stars on television with The Apprentice, and it would have been one of the biggest stories of the year. Think of it. She's doing a story on Melania, who's pregnant at the time, and Donald Trump, our one-year anniversary. And she said, I made inappropriate advances. And by the way, the area was a public area, people all over the place. Take a look. You take a look. Look at her words. You tell me what you think. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Do you understand the point being made here? Donald Trump seems more embarrassed by the idea that he would be with a woman that he sees as not attractive than the idea that he would sexually assault a woman. If you don't sexually assault women, Pat, you don't say, I didn't do it because look at her. You say, I don't sexually assault women. What he's saying is that looks are a factor in determining whether the claim of sexual assault is more or less likely to be valid. This bottom-feeding nonsense is an inherent part of Trump's character. It's incredibly embarrassing.
And of course, the whole campaign is in crisis management mode.
Yeah.
But, his whole rebuke is that what he's done is just words, and that Bill Clinton's done far worse, and that Hillary Clinton, because of course she's running, he has to make a point about that, enabled Bill and attacked these women, went after these women.
Sure.
He's doing the same thing here now.
He is doing the exact same thing, attacking their physical appearance, attacking their credibility, attacking their motives, et cetera, et cetera. Now, of course, the Trump campaign responded by saying, Trump was just saying, look at Stoynoff's words. When he said, look at her words, he meant just her words. Donald Trump, if there's one thing that Donald Trump doesn't do incorrectly, it's send these indirect comments in the way that he wants them to be interpreted. When he says, look at her words, he is absolutely saying both things. Now, at first, I thought that the Trump campaign would be really good for comedy because he's made Saturday Night Live irrelevant. He's made The Onion irrelevant. But you actually can't come up with something that is sillier than what he does. So it becomes almost impossible to parody. The parodies, you see them and you say, it's actually not any crazier or more outlandish than what Donald Trump has actually said. Let's go to yet another accuser of impropriety and inappropriate behavior by Donald Trump. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump was accused last week of making sexual comments to Marlee Matlin. Now, who is Marlee Matlin? She is the Oscar-winning actress who once competed in Donald Trump's program, Celebrity Apprentice. She is known to some people I know for her appearance on a Seinfeld episode as well. Now, it has been alleged that Donald Trump also seemingly had a habit of insulting, mimicking, and demeaning Marlee Matlin as, quote, retarded because she was deaf, and she is deaf. According to 3 longtime staffers who worked on that particular season of Celebrity Apprentice, Trump would reportedly regularly disrespect Marlee Matlin and would even treat her as if she was mentally disabled because she is deaf. Sometimes the insults would reportedly be behind her back. Sometimes the insults would be right in front of her. And of course, we know about these really extensive non-disclosure agreements that everybody involved with anything that Trump does have to sign. All the sources said, I will talk about this, but only anonymously because of fear of retribution. One source said Trump would often equate that she was mentally retarded. Trump would sometimes, you would see Trump scribbling notes during The Apprentice. And then someone who was familiar with the notes would say, for example, Trump would write down, Marlee, is she retarded? Of course, Marlee, deaf, not in any way mentally handicapped or disabled. And during breaks, Donald Trump would often still be mic'd up. He would be engaging in chit chat, maybe with Donald Trump Jr. or other people. He would make fun of Marlee Matlin's voice because she is deaf and she speaks in a particular way. Every indication, Pat, from everybody that's been spoken to, is that this is exactly in line with what Donald Trump has said that he does, right? He doesn't have much tolerance for people who don't have the right physical appearance, people who don't act in the right way. It's not like it's super hard to believe because Trump has a history of making fun of disabled people. Remember the Wall Street Journal journalist who Trump said, oh, I never met the guy. He actually met him 12 times, etc. Everything we're hearing is not only absolutely offensive, but completely in line with what we've learned about Trump.
And I think during this whole campaign, the most damning and offensive thing that he's done was maybe making fun of that reporter, because everyone knows or is related to someone with some special needs.
Of course. And then, of course, claiming he doesn't know the person, he did know the person. And we'll get to more about Trump's denials about knowing people a little bit later. So it doesn't stop there. Former Miss Teen USA, Kamie Crawford, tweeted that she had been told before meeting Donald Trump that Donald Trump didn't like black people. Here is a tweet from Kamie Crawford, who was named Miss Teen USA 2010. She said she first met Trump when she was 17. The most Trump tea I'll spill for this day is this. When I was 17, I met Mr. Trump for the first time as Miss Teen USA, as the first woman of color, ... And then here is part 2 of Kamie Crawford's tweet about this. To win the title in almost a decade, I was forewarned prior to meeting him that, quote, Mr. Trump doesn't like black people, so don't take it. And she went on to say, don't take it personally. Crawford was reportedly told that if Trump isn't extremely welcoming to her, don't worry, it's just because she's black. But if he is welcoming to Kamie Crawford, then it must be because Kamie Crawford is the, quote, type of black that Donald Trump likes. And she said, sure enough, after I was warned about him, I saw him in action and witnessed him completely snub a black contestant at Miss Universe rehearsals. But apparently, Crawford was the type of black person that Trump liked, saying that Trump would basically tote her around, brag about how beautiful she was, how well-spoken she was. She's so smart. Look at how smart she is. She said on Twitter that she is indeed supporting Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. This is, of course, making right-wingers totally disregard her claims. But the basic picture that's being painted here, when we talk about the type of black that Donald Trump likes, when we talk about him parading her around saying, look at how smart and well-spoken she is, this is, you know, when you hear from people, I like certain black people, and what they're referring to is light-skinned black people that in their eyes don't, quote, act black. We've heard this so many times, Pat. This is such a common thing. I love black people. I love certain black people. And it always seems to be black people fitting a certain caricature, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you remember, too, in the last debate, when asked about race relations, he responded with inner cities, an answer on inner cities.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not what you were asked about here. He's trying to give a wink and a nod to his white constituency.
No doubt about it. And it's yet another unproven allegation, right? Just another claim to be skeptical of. Of course, it fits perfectly into the picture that we've built up of Donald Trump, based heavily in part on the things Trump himself has actually said. All right, I love it when Donald Trump gets caught lying. Now, I'm not talking about politician lies like look at what Obama did to the deficit. I'm talking about flat out lies. Remember when Donald Trump made fun of that disabled reporter and later he tried to defend himself by saying, I had no idea the guy was disabled because I never met the guy. Turns out he had met the guy a dozen or so times before, and it is happening again. One of the women who has accused Donald Trump of sexual assault, Natasha Stoynoff, said, Donald Trump said, oh, she's not really good looking enough for me to sexually assault her. That's what he said about Natasha Stoynoff. With Temple Taggart McDowell, he took a little bit of a different approach. Now, Temple Taggart McDowell is the former Miss Utah who claimed that Donald Trump forcibly kissed her in 1997. Get a load of this. Trump initially denied by saying, I have no idea who this person is. Here is a quote from Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump saying this to NBC News. Quote, I don't even know who she is. She claims this took place in a public area. I never kissed her. I emphatically deny this ridiculous claim. Unfortunately, reporters have started looking into that claim, and it turns out Trump has contradicted himself. It turns out that back in May, right, we're talking about 5 months ago, when Temple Taggart McDowell's allegation first was made public in a New York Times story, Trump, as reported by the Daily Mail, said, oh, no, yeah, I know the story. I remember meeting her. She recanted the story, etc. Let's put up that quote from Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump to the Daily Mail on May 24th. Then there was that nice girl from Utah, the one who said I gave her a kiss. She recanted. She said it never happened. You know what? She was a nice kid. She was in front of her parents. We had thousands of people there in the audience. She said, hi, Mr. Trump. And she came over and gave me a hug. And I gave her a kiss on the cheek. Huh. How do you go from such a specific and detailed recollection to not even remembering her at all 5 months later? It's sort of weird, isn't it? You know what? She was a nice kid, kiss, hug, blah, 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 blah. I was expecting when I read the headline, this is going to be more of a gotcha thing where Trump made some vague reference to her. No, he talked about her in specific detail, and now he doesn't remember who she is, Pat. Unusual, isn't it, for the guy who prides himself on remembering everything?
Yeah, I, for one, am shocked that Trump would make such a declarative statement a few months back and then completely contradict himself.
With a lot of people, you say, oh, we have to look at the context, right? And you look at the context, and then you say, oh, it's not as bad as the headline made it seem. It was taken out of context, no big deal. With Trump, you get the context and you come away thinking, wow, it's even worse than the headline made it appear to be. Now, there is yet another Apprentice contestant who says Trump sexually assaulted me. Summer Zervos is a former contestant on season 5 of The Apprentice. She came forward a couple of days ago with new accusations of sexual assault on behalf of Republican nominee Donald Trump. Zervos said very specifically that Trump thrusted his genitals on her. She spoke about an incident where she had lunch with Trump and he kissed her on the lips twice. This is not what I wanted or expected, she said, adding that her friend and parents were also told about this and were able to corroborate the incident. In a statement later Friday, Trump, of course, denied ever having met Zervos, ever having greeted Zervos inappropriately or meeting her in a hotel, as she claimed. Of course, we have corroboration. Summer Zervos spoke to her father immediately after the incident. In terms of her politics, not really a motive to discredit Summer Zervos. She is a Republican. She made that very clear at a press conference that she gave. And Gloria Allred was at the press conference with Summer Zervos. She says that she has been contacted by many more women alleging sexual assault about Donald Trump, asked whether they would be speaking out, going public. She said, I can't answer that question at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what Donald Trump said he does, right? Saying when you're a star, they let you do it. You can get away with anything. Trump at least thinks that they let him do it. Summer Zervos said it was not at all what she wanted, but Trump said, when I see a beautiful woman, I can't help it. I just start kissing her. And so many people email me saying, oh, you should be super skeptical of these claims. Trump told us this is what he does, and women are confirming Trump's own statements. The fact that women are coming forward to confirm that what Trump said he does, he's actually done, that's called corroboration. When women get out of hand, I slap them around. Imagine someone said, when women get out of hand, I slap them around. And then women come forward and they say, you know what, this guy slapped me around. That's not something that we should say, wow, it sounds crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And of course, a lot of people emailing me, Pat, saying, oh, we can't believe any of these women. Well, they're saying exactly what Trump himself said he does.
Yeah, and then his audacity to call them liars, too. I mean, this is the reason why a lot of women who are sexually assaulted don't come out right away, because they're going to be attacked and called liars by the media and everyone else.
And we've heard those stories from a lot of these women, haven't we?
We have, yes.
Yeah. Lastly, Kristen Anderson was talking to a friend at a crowded Manhattan bar when the man on the other side of the couch, sitting on the same couch, reportedly slid his fingers under her skirt, moved up her inner thigh, and touched her genitals. Anderson shoved the hand away, got up from the couch, and turned to take a look at who was sitting next to her, and recognized the man as none other than Donald J. Trump of Grab Them by the Pussy fame. Anderson said this took place in the early 1990s. She said she was in her early 20s and trying to make it in New York City as a model at the time. And over the years, Anderson, who's now 46 years old and a photographer in Southern California, told the story to different people she knew, casually at first. And one of her friends, Kelly Stedman, went to the Washington Post and told them about it and said, hey, my friend Kristen Anderson told me about this. A reporter contacted Kristen Anderson. She was initially not inclined to go public, ultimately decided to. And she said, quote, it's a sexual assault issue, and it's something that I've kept quiet on my own. And I've always kept quiet. And why should I keep quiet? Actually, all of the women should speak up. And if you're touched inappropriately, tell someone and speak up about it. Actually go to the authorities and press some charges. It is not okay. Now, of course, as Trump has done with all of the women who have made these charges, Trump says that she is making the entire thing up. Trump spokeswoman Hope Hicks saying Mr. Trump strongly denies this phony allegation by someone looking to get free publicity. It is totally ridiculous. It doesn't really seem like she wants publicity. The way we've heard the story told, it seems like she feels after she was contacted by the Washington Post because of something a friend told them. She said, I was assaulted and I am going to go public with it. Lots of denials from the Trump campaign, each with crazier explanations than the last. She's not attractive enough for me to be sexually assaulting her. I never met her, after actually telling a story very, very specifically where you actually recount the incident where you met her. And of course, this is just a flat out denial, and we can't believe any of these women. It's interesting to me that all of these women come out and give very similar stories. Women who don't know each other, women who tell stories that are very, very similar to what Donald Trump himself has said that he does, right? And the immediate reaction is to just assume that they are flat out lying. Doesn't really make sense to me. Doesn't make sense to me at all. And this is having an impact on Donald Trump's campaign polling. We will talk about that later this week before the last debate on Wednesday. Donald Trump's polling falling off a cliff. The numbers really not looking good. And these encounters that we are now learning about absolutely having an impact. We'll take a break. Back with more after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is David Vargas. David, thank you so much for supporting the program. We depend on the support of people like David Vargas who go to davidpakman.com/membership and sign up for membership. You can also support the work that we do by going to davidpakman.com/Amazon before you shop on Amazon. Everything you buy will send us a little kickback. A couple of people buying dash cams recently through our Amazon link. It's crossed my mind at different times to get a dash cam. And I know that a lot of people say, it just seems crazy, but especially here in Boston, the driving is so nuts. And there's all sorts of people crossing in the street where there's no crosswalk, people biking with absolutely nothing reflective at night, that sometimes I almost say to myself, Pat, just for like legal protection, maybe I should have one of these dash cams, but I haven't made the jump yet. I don't know if you've thought about it.
Well, just make sure that if you actually are at fault for the accident, that you remove that as quickly as possible.
Oh, yeah, I would do the exact same thing police do, right? Which is, you want to review the footage from this questionable incident? Yeah, it just wasn't working that day. We don't know what happened. Just the hard drive was cleared and the local memory was cleared just for the 15 minutes in question. It's really strange, officer. No, of course I would never do that. But some people in our audience using dash cams, also a bunch of people ordering the book Underground Airlines, which we interviewed the author of last week, Ben Winters. Very good book. I recommend it. Glad some people are checking it out. Remember, davidpakman.com/Amazon. Okay, a Republican headquarters in North Carolina was firebombed over the weekend. Republican Governor Pat McCrory has called it an attack on democracy and an act of political terrorism. Hillsborough police said that someone threw like a flammable liquid through the window of the Orange County's Republican headquarters. It set everything ablaze. The pictures are disturbing. There was a swastika found which said Nazi Republicans get out of town or else, below it or above it, spray paint, etc. Now, this really shouldn't be responded to politically. This is a crime. It's meant to intimidate. It has no place in politics. The perpetrators must be found, prosecuted, and held fully responsible, period. But interestingly, consider the reactions from our two presidential candidates. Here is a tweet Hillary Clinton sent about this incident. The attack on the Orange County headquarters office is horrific and unacceptable. Very grateful that everyone is safe. What about Donald Trump? Here is a tweet from Donald Trump about this incident. Animals representing Hillary Clinton and Democrats in North Carolina just firebombed our office in Orange County because we are winning. Now, not that it matters, but Trump isn't winning in North Carolina. He's losing within the margin of error. But the real issue is, how does he know whether the actors represent Hillary Clinton and Democrats? How does he know they don't represent right-wingers who are upset with Trump being the nominee? How does he know it wasn't the doing of a provocateur? I received 2 emails from people saying, David, given what Donald Trump has done and said this campaign, I wouldn't put it past Trump to coordinate a firebombing of a Republican headquarters just so he can blame it on Hillary Clinton in a state where it's close and take attention away from his own disastrous campaign. That goes pretty far, but there's a less conspiratorial argument, which is that the hate and culture of violence that Trump has legitimized could be just as much or even more responsible for what took place than anything Hillary Clinton has done. And oh, by the way, a crowdfunding campaign led by a Democrat has already raised $13,000 to rebuild the office. There's a Boston Democrat named David Weinberger of Brookline, Massachusetts, who started a campaign on GoFundMe to raise funds to rebuild the facility. 40 minutes after the first donation came in, they had raised over $13,000 from over 500 contributors, surpassing the goal of $10,000. And this was a Democrat who decided to do this. Now, the one confusion I have is reports say the office is a total loss. So I don't know what you need the money for, but I guess it's to replace or go towards a new office in some way. Anyway, I know we sort of have to be careful about conversations like this because I don't want to incite anything, but this is a real conversation we have to have. I'm worried about Election Day being pretty nasty and violent. I remember back in 2004 when George W. Bush was up for re-election, it was getting pretty bad back then, and I was sort of worried about violence and people taking to the streets depending on what the results were. My concerns this year are way, way bigger when I look at the vitriol and the violence that we've already seen, and the firebombing may or may not be sort of directly related to the violence we might see. I'm pretty worried, Pat, about the violence we might see, particularly if Trump loses on November 9th.
Yeah, especially because, a third of the electorate is going to think that the election was rigged and that our whole democracy is illegitimate.
Speaking of rigged elections, Donald Trump thinks that even Saturday Night Live is part of a media conspiracy to bring down his presidential candidacy. Saturday Night Live opened with yet another one of these mocking reenactments of the second presidential debate. And it was a parody that included the moderators taking shots, kung fu style greeting between Trump and Hillary Clinton, making fun of everybody, right? But of course, making fun of Trump. Trump didn't like it. He called for the show to be pulled off of the air. But of course, part of the critique is that Saturday Night Live parodies of Trump and Hillary Clinton are part of a plot to rig the election in Hillary Clinton's favor. Here's a tweet that Donald Trump sent out saying, "Watched Saturday Night Live hit job on me. Time to retire the boring and unfunny show. Alec Baldwin portrayal stinks. Media rigging election." The great thing is, and with Trump, some double standard or conflicting statement isn't too well hidden or too far behind, Trump was thrilled to host Saturday Night Live 11 months ago. He said it was terrific and that he actually has hosted more than once. Here is a Donald Trump tweet that he sent out back in November of 2015. "Amazing evening at Saturday Night Live." Now, you might write this off just as Trump being Trump being a little annoyed with the portrayal of him, but this is part of a broader targeting of the media that Donald Trump has been ramping up as his poll numbers declined. And the entire setup of a rigged election is wrapped up in Trump's slamming of media outlets. This isn't exactly alpha male behavior, is it, Pat? You know, Donald Trump Jr. And others have said, this is alpha male behavior. Pat Robertson, Trump's alpha male. Crying about Saturday Night Live portraying you in a way you don't like, not exactly alpha behavior.
He's like the kid on the playground who cries and says, "I'm going to take my ball and go home."
Yeah, or the one who says, "I'm going to pour water in the sandbox because it's time for me to leave and I don't want anybody else to play with it." Now I'm sort of understanding all along what Trump has meant when he said rigged election. Anything that could be construed as maybe influencing opinion qualifies as rigging an election for Donald Trump. So the entire election clearly is rigged because there are people, journalists, programs, commentators, whoever, that are trying to influence the election one way or another. Next, he's going to say, oh, you know what? The American people rigged this election by going out there and voting for Hillary Clinton. And the sort of dumbest thing about this for me is the SNL parodies mimic Hillary Clinton as well. Trump's not the only victim or target of the parodies. Now, yes, Trump is the most outrageous candidate we've seen in a long time. So, of course, you've got more material on him than you do on Hillary Clinton. But for people who think it's all just funny now, Trump is setting the stage for denying the election results based on them being rigged. And I think you mentioned, Pat, there's a significant portion of the electorate right now who believes if Trump loses, it will be because of a rigged election.
Right. And of course, SNL is just working with the material that he gives them.
Yeah.
And if he wants that to stop, he should just stop making so many gaffes and policies that don't make any sense.
It is very dangerous to have a major party nominee attempting to delegitimize the election. All Republicans should be standing up to denounce this because it threatens the very foundation of our democracy. And some Republicans did stand up and say, you know what, I support Trump. I don't support Hillary. I'll be voting for Trump. But there's no rigging of this election going on. And some Republicans I mean, I hate to use the term bravely, saying we have elections that are legit in most of our states. That is not something that should be considered brave. But because of what's going on in this culture around Trump and the accusations of rigged election, it does kind of take some bravery. Let's take a break. Next, we will speak to a 1%er who isn't buying much of what Trump is saying about the estate tax, taxation, and so much else. Stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome back to the program Chuck Collins, who is a researcher, campaigner, storyteller, and writer based at the Institute for Policy Studies, where he co-edits inequality.org. He's written extensively on wealth inequality in previous books. The new book is Born on Third Base. A 1%er makes the case for tackling inequality, bringing wealth home, and committing to the common good. Chuck, it's so great to have you back. And so much of the book really refers to much of what is the debate around Donald Trump and his so-called credentials as a good business person. There are those who say that Trump's business credentials are truly incredible. What he's been able to do really is an example of starting with very little and growing it through his business acumen and expertise and skills. And there are others who say when you start on third base, as you might argue Donald Trump did, you're going to score a lot of runs, and that's sort of the analogy as to what took place there. Let's just get into it there. How do you see and interpret this idea of being born on third base and thinking you hit a triple in light of the Trump campaign?
Well, I think he really is a great example of someone who was born on third base, who had tremendous advantages at the beginning. And it's not to take away anything from what he's done over the course of his life, but when you are born into a family like his that essentially already has an existing, very profitable business, not only the money, I mean, somewhere between $1 and $14 million in loans that his father gave him, but also in relationships, political contacts, links to lenders. I just think we greatly underestimate how much advantage gets passed on when you're in a wealthy family to the next generation. And we've had a few of these born on third base presidential candidates or presidents. I mean, George W. Bush, Mitt Romney, they were all kind of big on talking about their own business success without really kind of fessing up to what I would say is the huge advantages that they got at birth.
I'd be curious to hear from you, currently, if we compare Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump is significantly wealthier than Hillary Clinton, but Hillary Clinton is also significantly wealthier than almost everyone on this planet, right? So while we're talking about two different degrees of wealth, they're both incredibly wealthy individuals. The difference being, as you're pointing out, Donald Trump born to a wealthy family, whereas Bill and Hillary Clinton have accumulated wealth over the last 20 years, mostly 20, 30 years after their entrance into public life. In your experience, given the people you know and your experience being born into a wealthy family, is there any material difference that the average person should be aware of when we look and say, I see two wealthy people, one wealthier than the other, based on the idea of one being born into it versus one becoming wealthy as an adult?
Well, I think that the experience of, say, in the case of Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton, growing up in working class families or even poor families in the case of Bill Clinton, is a very, very different experience. You have to sort of overcome not only lack of money, but sometimes a lack of agency and other challenges. So it's very significant to grow wealth or to become wealthy over one's lifetime, as opposed to just sort of being born, as I was, and Donald Trump, born into affluent families with these, with this incredible wind at our back. So I think first generation entrepreneurs, like my great grandfather, but not me, do have to make huge sacrifices sometimes to get where they are. That said, you're right. All the candidates and most of us in the top fifth of the United States are in the tippy toppy of income and wealth holders from a global level and a national level. And we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we're really a society now that's largely governed by people who are wealthy.
Chuck, you've been an advocate for the more extensive taxation of inheritances. And there are a lot of sort of shades of gray in that conversation. Some saying all inheritances should be taxed as ordinary income, which would be a significant increase to the way inheritance is currently taxed. Others saying, hey, if someone in your family worked hard enough to make the money, you shouldn't be punished because they want to pass that money on to you. And then sort of in between would be the shades of gray as to how much money do we want to exempt from taxation based on estate tax law. Give me your sense for your sort of general principles and view on this, and then get as specific as you want in terms of how and why you think it should be managed in that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're living in a time of extreme inequality where huge concentrations of wealth are accumulating at the top. And there are two good reasons why we should tax accumulated wealth at a very, very high level. One is just to put a brake on that concentration of wealth. If we don't want to become a hereditary aristocracy of wealth, we have to do something to limit it. And the other is to recycle that wealth. My view is people who've accumulated wealth at that level didn't do it alone. It's largely a function of the society that we have that creates a fertile ground, and that those folks should pay back the society so that other people not born wealthy can have the same opportunities that they had. So I'm an advocate of what I would call a steeply progressive estate tax, and actually probably a wealth tax during life too, a modest wealth tax on wealth put it over $500 million, a 1% wealth tax, and put it into something that everyone can see, like a debt-free education college fund, or something that helps early childhood education, something that's clearly linked to opportunities for the next generation. A program like that would greatly reduce inequality, but would also raise the floor and create real opportunities for everyone else.
What about with individuals like, for example, Bill Gates, or maybe Warren Buffett is a good recent example, who's recently designated an overwhelming portion of his wealth to go to the Gates Foundation, a charitable donation, essentially, rather than creating his own foundation. In the Chuck Collins sort of estate tax plan, how would a very wealthy person who has already said most of my wealth is going to charity, how would that impact your sort of view on estate taxation and wealth tax?
That's an excellent question. I would advocate capping the amount of wealth that can be given to charity and where there's a deduction. And actually, Bill Gates's dad, Bill Gates Sr., and I wrote a book together about why we should keep the estate tax, and we traveled extensively. And he quite publicly said, there's something wrong with the possibility that my son could give $82 billion to charity and never pay any taxes, because taxes pay for something quite different. The charity work is important and does innovate. Many things are, can be funded through charity, but charity does not build public infrastructure. It doesn't fund the food stamps. It doesn't keep our national parks open. So no one should be able to completely opt out of paying taxes, especially if you have billions and billions of dollars. So I would say there should be a lifetime cap. Again, maybe $500 million, above which you can give that money away, but you have to pay taxes on that as a form of inheritance. No one should be able to opt out entirely just because they're super wealthy.
I am obviously, my audience knows this, completely against the sort of standard supply side economic taxation ideas. I mean, I recognize the straightforward economics of, if you lower the corporate tax rate, you're actually reducing the incentive for a corporation to put that money in play. If you increase the corporate tax rate, you're actually incentivizing businesses to hire more and build, et cetera. I'm sort of thinking along these incentive lines. How would a rich person be differently incentivized or less incentivized to continue whatever they're doing entrepreneurially or otherwise if they know, no matter how well this does, I might not be able to pass all of it on to my family. I might not be able to get the tax benefit that I would expect or want donating the money. Aren't you creating a disincentive for some people in our society?
Based on my interviewing hundreds of entrepreneurs, people who are very, very wealthy, I think that there is an incentive to get wealthy, maybe for the first $5 million or the first $10 million. But after a certain point, it is no longer really an incentive. It's not, some people do like to keep score, but beyond that, it's not an incentive. And I think more and more I'm encountering people who are saying, when you reach a certain level of wealth, you actually do see this web of supports that made it possible, including not everybody sees this web, but a growing number of people do. That, that wealth is a function of this society, and an act of gratitude is not only to give it back through charity, but to pay it back through taxes, so that young people, the next generation, can have the same public infrastructure and opportunities that the previous generation of wealth creators did. So, I think it's somewhat of a myth that, paying people huge amounts of money is an incentive. It really, after a certain point, it's no longer a driving incentive for all the entrepreneurs I've talked to.
Let me remind you that Chuck Collins's new book is Born on Third Base. A one percenter makes the case for tackling inequality, bringing wealth home, and committing to the common good. The book is extraordinary. I have read it, and I encourage you to as well. Chuck, great as always to talk to you.
Thanks, David, for the conversation.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Professor David Seidemann at the City University of New York's Brooklyn College was ordered to make some changes to a syllabus because it supposedly constituted sexual harassment. And according to Seidemann, a university administrator expressed that there were three problems with the syllabus. Number one being that under the grading portion of the syllabus, the 10% grade for effort, quote, applied only to select students when appropriate, suggested sexual harassment. Now, how is this sexual harassment? It's not totally clear. Seidemann was interviewed by Reason.com and said that his department chair said that the 10% section could be construed as a prelude to sexual harassment because it might imply that in certain cases to certain students, maybe sexual favors would be allowed in order to improve a grade under that 10% effort based on when it is required for certain students. Now, Seidemann told Reason.com that he was told it should be changed at once. He was also initially in trouble for writing in his syllabus, "This classroom is a, quote, unsafe space for those uncomfortable with viewpoints with which they may disagree. All constitutionally protected speech is welcome." The director of the department ultimately conceded that that was fine. So this is sort of odd, right? The matter is now officially closed. To some, this will be read sort of as no harm, no foul. Seideman's tenured job was never on the line. It was ultimately closed. That's it. Others say, oh, no, no, no. This is really making that line very hazy between academic freedom and campus interpretations of Title IX. Now, I have broader thoughts. I've always thought that effort grades are really sort of subjective and actually a really good way for a professor to, if they want to, knock off a full letter grade for a student who maybe expresses an unpopular opinion in class or something like that. And I've talked to my mom about this because she's a college professor, has been for a very long time. She said instead of effort, what she puts on the syllabus is attendance and participation in class are more objective measures to try to avoid this idea of, oh, well, it's totally subjective. Who says what effort is? You can measure attendance and you can also measure participation in class. The thing that really strikes me as odd here is that a geology professor is putting in his syllabus things about politically correct culture and safe spaces at all. I mean, I get it in humanities. I get it in social sciences. Okay. But geology? Safe space warning, or there won't be safe spaces allowed here, and blah, 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 political correctness in a geology class. It strikes me as a little bit odd. And you know, the bigger picture of this in terms of, well, no harm, no foul because the investigation was closed, or no, this was really an attempt to try to stifle free speech. I don't even get why you would need something like this in a geology class. Did you ever have hard science classes, Pat, where things became political or issues of safe spaces or political correctness even came up? I didn't.
I mean, there was environmental science class, which were inherently political because you have to deal with the policies behind them.
Yeah, I never experienced this either. When I was, believe me, I was in many very political classes within social sciences, within humanities, etc. None of the admittedly relatively few science classes I took, astronomy, for example, various intro science classes when I was an undergrad, there was nothing even bordering on anything requiring a safe space declaration one way or the other or anything like that. I find that a little weird, and that's what a lot of people emailing me are reacting to, which is, yeah, effort, whether you think effort is a legitimate part of a grade or not, that's sort of one conversation, but a geology class even requiring this, that suggests to some people in our audience that something was already up with this professor. I don't know. I don't know the guy beyond this story, and maybe we'll learn more about it. Send me your thoughts on this. Donald Trump on Saturday called for both himself and Hillary Clinton to take a drug test prior to the third presidential debate, which is Wednesday. During a campaign rally Saturday in New Hampshire, the Republican presidential nominee compared himself and Hillary Clinton to athletes. Maybe a bit of a stretch of a comparison, but let's take a look at the video where he called for this drug test.
Like athletes, right? So athletes, they're making them more and more, but athletes, they make them take a drug test, right? I think we should take a drug test prior to the debate. I do. I think we should. Why don't we do that? We should take a drug test prior, because I don't know what's going on with her. But at the beginning of her last debate, she was all pumped up at the beginning. And at the end, it was like, oh, take me down. She could barely reach her car. So I think we should take a drug test. Anyway, I'm willing to do it.
Really hitting all the major campaign issues at this rally, huh? I do sort of feel bad for the writers of House of Cards right now. They have to get together and create something crazier and more outrageous than the real world campaign we're experiencing. I imagine the writers of House of Cards sitting in a room writing for the upcoming season. And then that night, they see the latest insane thing Trump says, like we should all be taking drug tests before the debates. And then they get back together the next day and they scrap all of those ideas and they say, it's just not crazy enough. It's too believable. It doesn't even seem nuts because of what Donald Trump has been doing. And Scott Adams, who's the creator of Dilbert, I grew up loving Dilbert, and I've been really distraught at some of the insane pro-Trump stuff that Scott Adams has been saying lately. He wrote an article where he said he believed Hillary Clinton engineered 90 minutes of alertness at the first debate with some kind of performance-enhancing drugs. I'm not against a pre-debate drug test in principle if the candidates also subjected themselves to a pre-debate psych evaluation, and then I think we'd be all on the same page.
And of course, she's not on any performance-enhancing drugs. She just studies and knows her stuff
Right.
and is prepared for what could happen on stage.
Right.
And of course, he's not willing to do the same thing.
Trump reacting to the fact that Hillary seemed so ready for those questions. They mentioned stuff to her and she knew what it was and knew all about it. It's just crazy. The other angle, of course, knowing that there won't be a pre-debate drug test, is that Trump is doing this to push back against the cocaine rumors based on the constant sniffing at debates. I'm going to play a clip for you, okay? You tell me whether you can understand what Trump says here without accounting for some kind of substance that the guy is on.
Having nuclear, my uncle was a great professor and scientist and engineer, Dr. John Trump at MIT. Good genes, very good genes, okay? Very smart. The Wharton School of Finance, very good, very smart. You know, if you're a conservative Republican, if I were a liberal, if I ran as a liberal Democrat, they would say I'm one of the smartest people anywhere in the world.
Right.
It's true. But when you're a conservative Republican, they try, do they do a number? That's why I always thought of went to Wharton, was a good student, went there, did this, built the, I have to give my credentials all the time because we're at a little disadvantage. But you look at the nuclear deal, the thing that really bothers me, it would have been so easy, and it's not as important as these lives are. Nuclear is so powerful. My uncle explained that to me many, many years ago, the power, and that was 35 years ago. He would explain the power of what's going to happen, and he was right. Who would have thought? But when you look at what's going on with the 4 prisoners, now it used to be 3. Now it's 4. But when it was 3, and even now,
Go on.
I would have said it's all in the messenger. Fellas, and it is fellas because, they haven't figured that the women are smarter right now than the men, so, it's going to take them about another 150 years. But the Persians are great negotiators. The Iranians are great negotiators. So, and they just killed. They just killed us.
That was one sentence. I mean, that was 1 minute and a half run-on sentence. If I were Trump, I would want to attribute that to drug use, because if that's just the way you think and speak, you obviously can't handle being president of the United States, which is something that we already know. So very, very strange. And if a technique that some are suggesting is Trump knows there won't be a drug test. Trump is suspected of having been on drugs because of all that sniffing. So what you do is you go out there and you say, we should drug test because I think Hillary's on drugs. People will say, Trump would never call for a drug test if he was on something, right? Brilliant technique from Trump of misdirection here.
Yeah, and Lance Armstrong did the same thing when accusations were coming out in the early 2000s against him.
Yep, no doubt about it. So when you see more similarity between Trump and Lance Armstrong than Trump and any other president we've ever had, it should make you question what the hell is going on here, as Donald Trump likes to say. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Let's take a listen to this voicemail.
Hey, David. I saw a video with you on YouTube and hate treat mail where David is, effeminate, he's girly or whatever. Do you think that... Oh, I'm too drunk.
Yeah.
Damn it. Do you even lift, bruh? And do you think that lifting weights is something that everyone should do? Do you think that everyone should have a standard of exercise?
Yeah. I think lifting weights is good. I think it's not good to max out. I think it's good to be below your max weight. It seems it's not particularly healthy to be maxing out your weightlifting. So yes, I lift, bro. And I would not advise you to call the show drunk. It seems like people get really nervous, Pat. They get on, and especially if you're drunk, all of a sudden you don't know how to talk.
But I do honor his resiliency to keep going after he messed up a couple times.
On the bonus show today, the U.S. high school graduation rate has reached a new record high. We will also talk about a group whose conscience is really putting white evangelicals to shame. I am talking about Mormon voters. We will have an update on the 2017 David Pakman Show calendar, and also an update for you about the fainting incident. I will talk about that on the bonus show. There is only one way to get instant access to the bonus show. It is by being a David Pakman Show member. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. I would love to speak to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.